Good early afternoon, everybody. Super Jack01 here. I just want to say Happy New Year to you all because today is December 31st, 2025, our very last day of 2025. And now we have a big video for you. I'm now going to be counting down my top 20 favorite movies of this year. Now, I'm going to be honest. There were a lot of good movies that came out this year, but I don't know. There were a lot less great movies and more good movies, if that makes any sense. So I didn't think there were as many, masterpieces or big movies to talk about like I did with 2024 and 2023. So just want to heads up that a lot of the stuff I'll be saying about some of the movies on this list will be very brief. But yeah, let's just get started as we rank my top 20 favorite movies of 2025. Let's get started.
I rotted in jail for 20 years!
Wicked for Good. I'm sure some of you might be surprised that it's at number 20 considering that the first film was so much higher on my list last year. Now, I don't hate this movie, I really enjoyed it a lot, but like a lot of people, I definitely had a lot of issues with it. Most of it comes down to its connections to The Wizard of Oz and trying to tie that story into this one. To me, that just didn't work, and I wish that they hadn't done that. I know that this happens in the Broadway show as well, but still. Another issue I had is that I found the pacing to be very clunky. The first 20-25 minutes are especially very sluggish, and it takes a bit for the movie to finally find its footing. I also gotta say that the script is a bit messy. I don't know how to describe it, but it doesn't feel like a cohesive A to Z story like Part 1 did. The story is all over the place. The way that some of the characters were handled in terms of their arcs was very questionable. Probably the one that I felt like wasn't handled well was Nessa Rose Thromp. My last issue is Michelle Yeoh's performance. Her acting and her singing in this movie aren't very good and feel off. It's so weird considering that her performance and her singing seemed just fine in Part 1. But I don't know, it just fell apart for this movie. With that said, there's still a lot that I really like about this movie. The main highlight of the film is easily Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. Their chemistry is just as strong and amazing as it was in Part 1. The best parts of the movie are when the two of them are on screen together. The relationship between Elphaba and Glinda is so intriguing, and I totally would have been down to see 5 more movies of this. Even though they both got Oscar nominations last year for Part 1, they deserve them again this year for this film. I think their performances in this movie were even stronger than they were in Part 1. The musical numbers were great as well, the standout song of course being For Good. Cynthia and Ariana really gave it their all in that scene to the point where there was actually a few people crying in the theater. Another number that I really liked was As Long As You're Mine. The cinematography in this movie is absolutely breathtaking. This is one of the most beautiful looking musical films ever. It deserves an Oscar nomination for that. Just like in Part 1, the set and the costume designs were amazing as well. They really helped make Oz feel more like a magical and mythical place. All of Glinda's outfits and dresses that she wears throughout the film are beautiful. But yeah, even though this movie has issues, I still really like it. Just not as much as Part 1.
19.
I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but Avatar Fire and Ash is my personal favorite of the Avatar films. Now, I'm not the biggest mega fan of these movies. They definitely have issues. This one is no exception. I think the movie is way too long, just like the second film was. There was no reason for this film to be 3 hours and 17 minutes long. There's so many scenes that I think could have been trimmed down or cut out entirely. The third act of this movie is almost a full-on carbon copy of The Way of Water's third act. A whole ocean battle and everything. Thankfully, it does change a little bit as it goes on, but it's not anything too new. I also wish we'd gotten to see a little more of Pandora. I mean, we're on Pandora for pretty much the entire film, but I would have loved to have visited a bunch of new locations that we hadn't visited before like we did in the previous film. With that said, there are things that I did really like. I'm not going to go too much into detail though, because the movie came out less than 2 weeks ago, so I don't want to give away too many major spoilers. The main reason why I like this movie more than the first 2 films is because, for once, I was actually invested in the story. I was actually intrigued and invested to see what was going to happen. That only happened occasionally when I watched the first 2 films. But here, I was on the edge of my seat and unsure what was going to happen in the next scene or how the characters were going to get out of certain scenarios. Like with the first 2 films, the visual effects in this movie are astonishing and beautiful to look at. Seriously, see this on an IMAX screen for these visuals alone. I think that Jake Sully is at his best in this movie. I feel like his character was a lot more likable and sympathetic compared to the first 2 films, where he honestly felt kind of bland and too tough. Here, they show a much softer side to his character that wasn't present in the previous films. I hope we see this side of Jake again in the next film. I like how Spider is a major focus for a good chunk of the film. Jack Champion's performance was probably the best one in the whole film. I think this is impressive considering that all of his scenes were apparently shot years after most of the cast had filmed their scenes. There's also a few other things that I like that I don't want to spoil. But yeah, I enjoyed Avatar Fire and Ash.
When we were 18.
Elio is the latest Pixar film, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I was a little apprehensive going into it considering its insane production and last minute changes. I was worried it was going to be another Good Dinosaur situation. Thankfully it wasn't. However, after hearing more about what went on behind the scenes, I'm honestly curious to see Adrian Molina's original cut of the film. I mean, how bad could his version possibly have been to the point where Pete Docter said, "Scrap it, we're starting over," when they were already halfway through animating the film and even had a teaser trailer out. But I digress. The movie we did get, though, is still pretty good. It's got everything a good Pixar film should have. A creative concept, a great story, likable characters, emotional story beats, strong and emotional messages, etc. This movie also has an actual villain, which was a refreshing change of pace. It also explores real-world themes that I think a lot of us can relate to. The animation of the alien world is so cool and visually appealing to look at as well. But yeah, not one of my favorite Pixar films, but still an enjoyable one.
It's been 17.
Superman was the very first film of the new DCEU, and I enjoyed it. Now, I will say that its flaws definitely stick out on rewatches. I would have liked to see or heard a little more about the backstory of this iteration of Superman and the other characters. Now, I'm totally fine with this not being an origin story. At this point, pretty much everyone knows Superman's origin story, but I would have at least liked to learn more about this specific version of Superman, Lois Lane, and the other Daily Planet characters, if I'm making any sort of sense. Same with Lex Luthor. Now, everyone knows that Lex Luthor is pretty much Superman's arch nemesis, but I would have liked to have learned a little more about how these versions of Superman and Lex became enemies, because we don't get any of that. The movie just starts off in the middle of a battle that's heavily implied to have happened several times. It sometimes feels like we're watching the sequel to a movie that was never made instead of, being the first film. I also personally think that the Justice Gang shouldn't have been in this movie. I think they should have waited until the sequel to introduce them, or even given them their own movie first. With those out of the way, there's a lot of stuff that I like. Like most people, I really loved Henry Cavill as Superman and felt like he was unfairly screwed over, but I'm happy to say that David Cornsweet is a worthy successor. He was amazing in this role, and I'm looking forward to seeing more appearances of this version of Superman too. He has a lot in common with Cavill's Superman, but is able to make them feel fresh in different ways. I gotta say that the main highlight of the film was Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. You could tell that he was having a blast in the role. He was able to be deliciously evil and was so fun to watch every time that he was on screen. Seriously, his performance might actually be Oscar-worthy. I also really liked how colorful the movie was. It looks like a comic book movie that was brought to life in live action. James Gunn's directing style really fits this light-hearted and fun film. The action and fight scenes are well choreographed and are very well shot. The entire third act still has me on the edge of my seat as well. But yeah, I think this was a pretty strong start to the DCU, and I hope all the films going forward can be on a similar level of quality.
16.
K-pop Demon Hunters. Probably the most talked about movie of the year. It's also the most watched film on Netflix. I'm sure some of you might be shocked that it's not higher on the list. That's mostly because I do have a few issues with it. The main one being that I don't like the film's use of the whole liar revealed trope. I honestly think it's stupid that Celine made Rami hide her demon patterns from Mira and Zoe. The explanation is honestly kind of dumb. I don't know, I feel like the script could have used another rewrite or two just to work out that whole thing. Aside from that, the rest of the movie is pretty good. This is one of those movies where the more I watch it, the more I really like it. The animation was pretty, the characters were likable, the story was creative, and the soundtrack was fire. Seriously, the songs in this movie definitely kick ass. My favorite is either How It's Done or Free. I totally get why the songs in this movie have been playing everywhere since it came out. But yeah, I really like this movie and can totally see why it's become so popular.
15.
The Running Man very much surprised me. I know a lot of people weren't too crazy about this film and thought it was just okay at best, but I honestly really liked it. Sure, it's not perfect and does have a few pacing issues towards the beginning, but once the actual hunt starts, that's when the movie gets really good and I'm invested from then on. It really keeps you on the edge of your seat. It also has a great performance from Glenn Powell. Seriously, this guy's been on a roll the last 3.5 years. Of course, Edgar Wright's direction really shines through like it always does. That's really all I have to say about this movie. It's a fun action chase movie that's definitely worth checking out if you're looking to kill some time.
He was just 14.
The Bad Guys 2 was a very worthy sequel. I really loved the first film. It's one of my favorite DreamWorks films ever. So I was happy that this sequel was on the same level of quality. It's pretty much has the same praises that I give to the first film. The characters are still charming and likable, the animation is still beautiful, there's a lot of funny gags, the villain is really good, etc. I really don't have much to say about it because it's pretty much has the same great elements that made the first one great. It's a really great and worthy sequel. That's pretty much all I have to say about it.
He has like 13 followers. 14! 13! I unfollowed you.
I don't care what anyone says, I really loved The Smashing Machine. I know that a lot of people really didn't like this one, and I have no idea why. There's a lot to really like about it. Most of it comes down to the cast, the main highlight being Dwayne Johnson as Mark Kerr. This movie is easily the best performance of his entire career. Now, I've always liked Dwayne Johnson, despite the fact that a lot of people hate him for his ego and other stuff, but I do agree with many people's claims that he literally just plays himself in most of his movies. That's not the case with this film. For this film, he gives an absolutely phenomenal performance as the struggling boxer who just got sober and is wondering if he still got it in him after losing his first match. See, Johnson is a really great actor when he's actually putting effort into his performances. Another standout performance is Emily Blunt as Dawn. I can't really describe why because I don't want to give any spoilers, but I will say that there is a scene between her and Dwayne Johnson around the third act that is just some of the most believable acting ever. Benny Safdie's directing is also really good. This was his first film where he directed by himself, and I gotta say that it was a pretty good solo debut. But yeah, unlike a lot of other people, I really like this film and recommend checking it out if you haven't. Marty Supreme is the most recent film on this list that I saw and is directed by the other Safdie brother, Josh Safdie. For the most part, I really enjoyed this movie. However, I will say that it was definitely not what I was expecting. I thought this was going to be a typical sports movie and be all about Marty Reisman's time playing ping pong. It's totally fine that it wasn't that, but at times this movie could get very over the top with some of the craziest things happening in one moment and are then completely forgotten about after that. I'm not going to go into detail on those moments because the movie just came out and I don't want to give away spoilers, but at times it felt like The Naked Gun mixed with Catch Me If You Can. With that said, I do think this is a really good movie though. Timothée Chalamet gives an amazing performance as always. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets nominated for an Oscar again. He's one of my favorite actors working today. The rest of the cast is really great as well. Especially Odessa Azion, please forgive me if I mispronounce that, as Rachel Misler. I think she has a big career ahead of her. Josh Safdie's direction was also really good. The cinematography was beautiful as well. The score was also really good. This is definitely one of my favorite movie scores from this year. Just a really well done score. The movie is also very fast paced. It's over 2.5 hours long, yet I was never bored at any point in the film. But yeah, definitely check this movie out when you get the chance. It's a very interesting watch.
Bird number 11.
I was curious to see the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants because I honestly wasn't that big of a fan of the previous theatrical SpongeBob film, Sponge on the Run. Well, I'm happy to say that I very much enjoyed this movie way more than Sponge on the Run. A lot of the issues that I had with that film weren't present in this one. Now, it does have a few minor issues. I was a little disappointed that Sandy and Plankton were barely in it. They mostly make brief cameos towards the beginning of the film, and then Sandy appears in the background during the crowd moments towards the end. But that's about it. I think it would have been fun if they had joined Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and Gary to go rescue SpongeBob and Patrick. I also don't get why the Flying Dutchman was voiced by Mark Hamill in this movie instead of Brian Doyle Murphy, who's been voicing the character since he debuted in 1999. Aside from that, there's so many things that I really liked about this movie. I feel like all the characters were well written. They honestly act like how they did in the pre-movie episodes. The most notable being Patrick. Now, he still has a lot of idiot moments and stuff, but he also has the common sense that he had in the earlier seasons. His stupidity in this movie is usually just used for jokes, and that's about it. It was nice that they finally decided to do something different in terms of the plot. Now, I'm still disappointed that Plankton only makes a cameo in the movie, but it was nice that for once the plot didn't have anything to do with him trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula like the first 3 films did. That was honestly such a refreshing change of pace. The jokes in this movie were really good and felt like they were from the pre-movie era. I actually laughed a good number of times throughout the film. Seeing all the locations in the underworld was really cool and they all looked visually appealing. There's also a few other things I could praise, but it's nothing too major. But yeah, I really like the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're a huge SpongeBob fan. Nobody 2 was a very satisfying sequel in my opinion. I loved the first Nobody film when it came out back in 2021 and was hoping we'd get a sequel. A few months ago, we finally did. I absolutely loved this movie. Now, I still think the first film is just a smidge better. The only thing that really holds this movie back from the first film is its villain, Lindina. She's not a terrible villain per se, but she just isn't as fleshed out as Julian, the villain from the first movie, was. That's mostly because she doesn't get enough screen time since she isn't introduced until much later in the film. But she's still a good villain with the little screen time that she does get. But yeah, this movie was a blast. If you love the first movie, then you're definitely going to love this one too. Its plot is somewhat of a rehash of the first film, but they're able to execute it in a way that feels different. Hutch is still a great and likable character, same with his dad and his brother Harry. The action scenes are a blast to watch. The The climax in the carnival resort was probably my favorite part of the film. Same with the fight on the duck boat. The fight in the arcade was also probably one of the most satisfying scenes ever. It was great that Becca had a bigger role in this movie than she did in the first film. But yeah, as you can tell, I really loved this movie and thought it was a pretty satisfying sequel. I would totally be down for a third Nobody film because I'm clearly digging these movies. Number 9. One Battle After Another is a fantastic movie and another example of why Paul Thomas Anderson is one of the best filmmakers working today. I'm sure some of you might be shocked that it's not a little higher on the list. That's mostly because I had a few issues that held it back from being higher. I do think it's a little too long. I think maybe 15-20 minutes could have been cut to get the movie down to a more appropriate length. I think the pacing the first hour or so is all over the place. Like the first 10-15 minutes or so is very fast paced and never stops to breathe when I think it should have, so I could get to know the characters more. Then after, it gets a little difficult to keep track of all the characters and figure out who is who. But once we're at the hour-long mark, that's when the pacing really picks up, stays consistent, and the movie gets really investing. The story is very interesting and keeps you on the edge of your seat. The opening scene immediately catches your attention and gets you hooked right in until the end. The cast is really great as well. Leonardo DiCaprio honestly deserves an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. I know that sounds typical, but I personally think this was easily one of his best performances. He really pulls off playing this drug-addicted dad with a former criminal history, but he's still a sympathetic character. There's a scene where he's on the phone screaming at this guy because he doesn't know the answer to the "what time is it" question, and it's absolutely hysterical. That scene alone is why he deserves a nomination. Another great performance is Sean Penn as the film's villain, Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw. He's a deliciously evil villain that you just love to hate and really hope he gets a well-deserved comeuppance. The way that the movie is shot is breathtaking. Paul Thomas Anderson's directing style shines as always, and I'm just blown away every time that I watch one of his movies. The amount of scenes that are just one continuous take is impressive. The third act is so stressful, in a good way, and keeps you praying that everything is going to turn out okay in the end. There's a couple other jaw-dropping and unexpected moments that I don't want to spoil. But yeah, definitely check this film out whenever you get the chance. I really enjoyed Fantastic Four First Steps. It was a major sign that the MCU is starting to get back on track. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I already did so in my MCU ranking video that I did a few months ago, so all I'm going to say is that the Fantastic Four team themselves were so well written and each one was perfectly casted. They all really play off of each other and work amazing together as a team. The climax was amazing. I was on the edge of my seat the whole way through and just hoping that the team would be able to protect Franklin. The mid-credit scene was also pretty insane and made me excited for Avengers Doomsday. But yeah, that's all I'm really going to say. Oh, a really good film that I recommend checking out if you didn't see it in theaters. Weapons was probably the biggest surprise out of any movie that I saw this year. Seriously, I was not expecting to enjoy this movie as much as I did, considering that I wasn't a fan of writer-director Zach Cregger's previous movie Barbarian. However, most of my issues with that film came down to the script. I did think that the movie was well made and directed, so I decided to give Cregger another chance, and I'm so glad that I did. This movie is just an absolutely batshit insane thriller that keeps your eyes glued to the screen from when the opening studio logos appear until the end credits roll. The plot takes all these twists and turns and ends up going in the exact opposite direction that you thought it was going every time that it jumps from character to character. The big twist in the movie is crazy. The cast is really good as well. Josh Brolin really gave it his all in his performance. I also think that Julia Gardner did a great job and found her character to be really interesting. There's a good amount of humor in this movie, especially in the climax. There's two sequences in the third act that had the audience in my theater howling with laughter. Thankfully, the humor actually works and is used appropriately without butchering the tone of the more serious scenes. But yeah, this movie was a pleasant surprise, and I definitely did not expect it to end up being this high on the list. Definitely check it out whenever you get the chance. Number 6. Thunderbolts was another great movie that gave me hope that the MCU was getting back on track. I really love this movie. Again, just like with Fantastic Four, I'm going to keep this section brief because I already talked about this film in the MCU ranking video, so watch that if you want to hear my more detailed thoughts. I think the cast is really good and they all play off of each other really well. I like that the movie delves into things like dealing with anxiety, depression, feeling guilty for things you did in the past, etc. These are things that I can relate to a lot. The humor is great, and just like in First Steps, the post-credit scene makes me really excited for Doomsday when it comes out next year. This really feels like a movie that could have been made during Phase 2 or sometime during the Infinity Saga. I highly recommend checking this movie out if you haven't already. Number 5. I really loved Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I know a lot of people seem to be really divided on this film. One side really loved it, another side really disliked it, but I'm in the first camp. In my opinion, this was a worthy finale to the Mission Impossible series. There's so many things that I love about this film. The best part of the film is easily the third act. It's absolutely insane. The stunts in the third act make me wonder if Tom Cruise is actually invincible or something. Seriously, that entire act was made to be seen on an IMAX screen. Director Christopher McQuarrie really knows how to direct insane action scenes. All the other action scenes in this movie were really fun and epic to watch. The scene where Ethan explores the abandoned submarine was really suspenseful and kept me on the edge of my seat. It's easily one of the best scenes in the entire film. You immediately get the vibe that something is going to go wrong and you're just waiting for it. There's a good amount of callbacks to the original film that shocked me, in a good way. They even brought back a major character from the movie. There's also other things that I could praise about the movie, but we'd be here all day. Overall, this was a really great movie, in my opinion, and I had a blast watching it in IMAX on opening night. Ballerina was an unexpected surprise and a great spin-off to the John Wick films. Seriously, this is one of the best spin-offs that I've ever seen. There's so much to like about this movie. Eve is a really great character. If you're one of those people who were worried that she was going to be one of those female characters who just suddenly became strong enough to take down several armed and big men, I can assure you that's not who her character is at all. They show that she had to do years of training in order to get where she was, and even then, they make it clear that she has weaknesses and isn't fully experienced yet. This helps raise the stakes a bit. Ana de Armas' performance was great, and I think she was perfect for this character. The action scenes in this movie are fantastic. They are just as batshit insane and over the top as the ones in the main John Wick films. The third act showdown in the village has this epic fight scene between Eve and one of the villain's henchmen that involves a flamethrower that was just epic. Honestly, these are some of the best and most fun action scenes that I've seen in any film. I also really loved how they handled John in this movie. I gotta say that I think John had a very appropriate amount of screen time. He doesn't overshadow Eve and her story, but he's also not a 2-minute cameo or something. He even gets a little fight sequence of his own in the climax. The film is perfectly paced. It's about 2 hours and 5 minutes, and I think that was the perfect length. It didn't feel too long, and the pacing was perfect. I was never bored at any point. But yeah, if you're a huge John Wick fan, then I definitely recommend checking this movie out. You won't be disappointed. I absolutely loved Wake Up Dead Man. Now, I still think that Knives Out was better. However, I thought this film was a major improvement over Glass Onion. All of the writing issues I had with that film weren't present in this one. Despite being a standalone sequel with none of the other characters returning except for Blanc, this honestly kind of feels like the true sequel to Knives Out. It has a very similar feel to that movie and is a lot more grounded, just like Knives Out was. I really appreciated that. I really liked how this movie has a much darker tone than the first two films. Now, there's still a good amount of comedy, and I laughed a few times throughout, but the story for this film is taken a lot more seriously, and the stakes feel a lot higher, even if they actually aren't. I like that, and it was a refreshing change of pace. Blanc is just as great in this movie as he was in the first two films. I like that we kind of saw a different side to the character that we didn't really get to see in Knives Out or Glass Onion. He actually has a bit of an arc in this film that I honestly wasn't expecting. But you can tell that Daniel Craig is still having a lot of fun playing this character. The cast in this movie is really strong. Like I said, Daniel Craig is great as always, but I think the standout performance in this film was easily Josh O'Connor as Father Judd. He plays the main character of this film, and he really gives it his all. This is probably the best performance of his career so far. His character in this film is someone that you really sympathize with and it is extremely easy to root for. Josh Brolin also gives a unique performance in the first act that really sticks with you throughout the film. Another great performance is Glenn Close. I wouldn't be surprised if she got an Oscar nomination because her performance was spectacular. The writing in this film is extremely strong, especially when Blanc finally explains the mystery and who did it. At first you're thinking it was too predictable, but then all these other revelations occur and they leave you completely shocked. The big twist in this climax was something that I did not see coming at all. I obviously won't spoil it, but yeah, please check out Wake Up Dead Man. I really loved this film. Zootopia 2 was my favorite animated film from this year. The original Zootopia is one of my top 3 favorite Disney films, so I'm happy to say that this was a very worthy sequel. This is probably Walt Disney Animation Studios' best film since Encanto. There's so much that I love about this movie. The world of Zootopia is greatly expanded upon in this movie, and we get to visit several hidden and secret locations that we didn't really get to see in the first film. Nick and Judy still have amazing chemistry and continue to play off of each other amazingly well. The story they came up with is so intriguing and had me invested just like the story in the first film did. A lot of the humor in this movie works great. My mom was actually laughing several times throughout the film when we saw it in theaters on opening day. All of the new characters that are introduced in this movie are all very unique and entertaining to watch. This movie also has an actual villain that's well written. First time in years that we've had a villain like that in a Disney film. There's also several other things that I could praise about this movie, but we'd be here all day. I know I say that a lot. I really loved this film, and it was very close to making the top of this list, but then one other film stood in its way. I haven't thought about any other movie this year more than I have with Sinners. I loved this movie when I saw it on opening day back in April and put it at the #1 spot on this list. However, I thought it would eventually lose that spot to a different blockbuster film, and it actually did a couple times throughout the year. But then my mind kept coming back to it, and I just couldn't resist myself from returning it to #1. This movie is a masterpiece and a perfect example of what film and cinema are supposed to be and why movie theaters still need to exist. Ryan Coogler, in my opinion, is the best African-American director working today. I truly believe that this movie is his magnum opus, and nothing will ever top it. There's so much that I love about this movie. Michael B. Jordan's performance in a dual role as the two brothers is fantastic. Despite the fact that he plays both of the main characters, they feel so different that I forget that they're played by one actor. The rest of the cast is also great as well, especially Haley Steinfeld. I think this is her first time playing a villain, and she's great in it. She should honestly play more villain roles. The cinematography in this movie is absolutely gorgeous, and the score is amazing. It really helps sell the 30s setting. The climax had me shocked and on the edge of my seat. I was also so shocked by the film's epilogue scene. It definitely did not go the way you would typically expect epilogues like this to go, and I mean that in a good way, a nice way to subvert expectations. However, there's two scenes in this movie that have stuck in my head since my first viewing. The first is the scene where Ramek has all of the people now possessed as vampires dancing around outside the club and singing Rocky Road to Dublin. That is an awesome scene that's able to be both suspenseful and enchanting at the same time. That scene alone deserves an Oscar, but I think the real mise-en-scene of the film is when Sammy sings I Lied to You during the party and we see different eras of music. That scene is one of my favorite scenes in cinema. Seriously, seeing this on the big screen on opening day had me floored and blown away. But yeah, Sinners is just an absolute masterpiece and takes the crown as my #1 favorite movie of 2025.
All right. Those are my top 20 favorite movies of 2025. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for my next video, which will be my first video in 2026.